There is a lot of breaking news that we need to cover today, folks. We more than just even the headline of what we're talking about on this video here about, Trump being unreliable and many things we already had scheduled to put it out. But even before we can get it on the air, just minutes actually before we came on, there's a couple of big issues that are brewing. We're going to cover it all today. And we've got back with us a great guest to have with Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst and friend of the show and a great guy to talk about so much of this stuff. Really glad to have you on today, Larry. But listen, let's just run in first of all to the one of the biggest breaking news that Israel is attacking into Syria,
right?
Attacking into Damascus, and apparently, according to one report coming out of the Israeli press, striking the presidential palace. What do you make of this?
These folks remind me of if you lock up a hungry dog in a chicken coop and the dog eats the chickens, and then you're surprised, you're an idiot, okay? It's that simple. And so,
can't they just get along? I mean, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, where's Rodney King calling for, unity? Look, Al-Julani, now al-Shara, was the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a Sunni Salafist terrorist organization that was rated in the top 7 of international terrorist organizations by the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Counterterrorism, based on data provided by the National Counterterrorism Center for at least the last 8 years, 8 years. And so what do? We help put him into power, and we know that thanks to Ambassador Jim Jeffries, who used to head the Counterterrorism Bureau at one point, that U.S. intelligence was meeting with, assisting, helping. So he put this guy in power, even though he's still on the rewards program, like, rewards posters behind me. And his organization is still a designated foreign terrorist organization. And yet, we got ambassadors there hugging him. We got senators saying, oh, this is great. And then what do? Well, his followers start killing Christians and Alawites. Now, Alawites are a version of Shia. And by virtue of that was one of the reasons Iran previously was in Syria, trying to help protect the Alawites. But now here's Al-Julani's crew killing them. And now they've ventured south, and they're in battles with the Druze. So Israel initially, and this too, people need to understand, Israel was initially quite supportive of this and helped make it happen, bringing Al-Julani, now al-Shara, into power. But now they've decided, okay, we got to get rid of him. Yeah, because he's attacking the Druze, except now.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I can interrupt for a second. What is it about the Druze? Because that's what a lot of the headlines have said, that Israel is claiming they are defending the Druze. Why does Israel care about a people group in Syria?
Yeah, well, they've had long-standing relations with the Druze, and the Druze are they're really like a closed society. They're sort of, let's call them like an Islamic version of Mennonites or Amish. They're very, you marry within, you don't go out to other strangers, but they have had a long-standing relationship with Israel. And so Israel now sees it incumbent to protect them.
But fair enough. But I mean, I haven't seen Israel being so altruistic to literally go fight for some other people group in another country. So I'm guessing there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. I don't know what the origin of that relationship, where it started. But what we do know where it's headed, which is armed columns of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and other ISIS fighters headed out of Idlib, heading south. So there's going to be a war between now these Islamic radicals, which Israel was helping, assisting in keeping around. It mounted to just come back to bite them in the rear end, because this thing's getting out of hand. And notice that Erdogan, he's nowhere to be seen now, and this is entirely under the control of the United States and the United Kingdom, in terms of, because they've invested so much political capital, if you will, in rebranding al-Shara. I mean, it was just literally last week or the week before last that my old office, the Bureau of Counterterrorism, took HTS off the terrorism list. Oh, never mind. They're no longer terrorists. They're our friends.
Well, yeah, because Al-Julani was wearing a suit, so he trimmed up his beard, so he's good to go.
Got a haircut.
Totally reformed.
Didn't quite go for the high and tight, but
Yeah, we talked about it. I think even you and I on this show right after all this was announced, and we said, yeah, well, it's a little early to be popping the cork on celebrating that. There's going to be a new peaceful regime in Syria now that Bashar al-Assad is gone, and looks like it happened a little bit quicker than I thought. It looks like Gary's got some imagery there from what's going on. We could spend the whole show on here, and unfortunately, we got a bunch of other stuff to have. Just real quick, where is this going? And I'm talking in the near term.
The fighting's going to dramatically increase, and Israel could potentially be faced with another front in a war that it can't fight.
That it just started. It just lit that match, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And notice Iran will be a player in this because the June 13th version of Pearl Harbor for Iran has united the country, but also united the Shia throughout the region. Recognized that there's both Persian Shia and Arabic Shia, and that the Shia extend into Syria. And the Alawites as well are a version of Shia. So Iran's going to come help them fight to defend themselves. So this is going to expand. It's not going to contract.
Yeah. All right. We're going to have you back on real soon to just like do a deep dive on this issue alone, because this needs a lot to do on that. But I want to shift gears here to our primary talk, because there's a couple different things. And by the way, before we get into that, some of our fans here are giving you a lot. They're really excited. This is actually posted before we even came on the air today. They were that excited. So thanks, Nikos. We agree with you. So Larry's got a colorful shirt and apparently colorful language too. So we'll see how that works.
I wouldn't say that I swear a lot. I have.
No, you don't.
I've done an occasional expletive, and I apologize for my crude behavior.
Sometimes it's necessary. But let's just jump in here too, because the theme of today is Trump's unreliability, and we're going to look at two separate ways that's playing out, and both of them are really. One of them is actually breaking even as just before we came on the air here with Trump making a statement on the Epstein issue. More on that in a second. But let's start off first with his behavior in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war. And he came into office, talking about how he was going to get out in a day and all that. We've talked about that a lot. But then he's listed a whole bunch of different headlines and a whole bunch of different timelines that really have meant literally nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he pulls on Monday. Now there's a new one, a 50-day deal that's going to cause set into motion a list of threats against Russia if they don't reach a negotiated settlement according to, I guess, what terms that Trump personally wants. We'll see how that's going to work out. But first of all, just kind of to set the stage, here is just a montage that Gary put together about some of the statements that Trump has made.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. And it will take me no longer than one day. I know exactly what to say to each of them. I got along very well with them.
Said very boldly, you could end this Ukrainian-Russia war in 24 hours.
Yeah.
How?
I would tell Putin, you got to settle. I would tell Zelensky, you got to settle. I would tell one, you're going to load up with money. I'd tell the other, you're not going to get any money. I would get a settlement in 24 hours.
As a candidate, you said you would have this war settled in 24 hours.
Well, I was being a little bit sarcastic when I said that. I would. What I really mean is I'd like to get it settled, and I think I'll be successful.
You've now been in office for 5 months and 5 days. Why have you not been able to end the Ukraine war?
Because it's more difficult than people would have any idea.
Okay, wait. Is it because it's harder than I thought? Is it because I'm being sarcastic? I mean, what is it? Because I assure you, those first few clips that we showed from 2023 and then the one with Hannity there, that was not sarcasm. He was flat out saying, I'm going to get him to settle this. Gary was doing that a minute. I can't do it as good as you see what I'm saying there? What do you make of that? And what does that tell you about the stability of the president of the United States of America?
I think the man actually has some serious let's call it mental issues that are developing as a consequence of his advanced age. What the particular condition is, I don't pretend to be a doctor to diagnose it. But what we cannot deny, just as we saw with Joe Biden, clearly erratic, contradictory statements and behavior. And, you don't have to believe me, as you just showed, just believe your own eyes. And to go from, the fact that he genuinely believed, I don't think he was lying.
Yeah, I don't either.
He genuinely believed that all I had to do is talk to Putin and talk to Zelensky and they're going to want to settle, because Donald Trump is not a reader. And so he doesn't know history. He's not keeping up to date on the facts. He's just going based on what he watches on television, what he sees on cable news or on social media. And without having an understanding of the issues or even appreciating his own role in helping provoke the war in Ukraine. The things that he did as president during his first term in terms of sending lethal weapons to Ukraine and allowing an acceleration in U.S., EUCOM, and NATO military exercises in Ukraine. He may not have, not necessarily implying that he signed off on them, but he had no concern whatsoever. He wasn't even paying attention. So he's now created a situation where, and again, another one of his deadlines. And you saw, maybe Gary has the clip of Lavrov saying, 100 days, 24 hours, 50 days, whatever. We've heard this before. We know that Trump actually doesn't mean what he says. That Trump says a lot of things that he doesn't follow through on. And this is going to be another example. But let me point out, there's one other aspect to this. I don't know if Trump made the promises about, NATO's going to buy the equipment from us and we're going to give it to NATO. And that way we don't have to pay for it. But what he's offering is it's not even feasible to be delivered in any conceivable near term. That even if he gives one Patriot missile battery, which includes 4 launchers, each launcher can fire 16 missiles. Okay, so and you usually fire 2 to 4 missiles to attack an incoming missile. Well, with Russia firing at the rate of 500, 600, 700, 550, and that's all over the last 6 days. That just do the math to figure how long it takes to exhaust a supply of 64 Patriot missiles. So let's say, we want to resupply. We want to be able to reload 4 times. Okay. Let's see, that's 256 missiles. Lockheed Martin produces annually 550 in 1 year. So right there in a period of 2 or 3 days, you could use up the half of the year's production of Lockheed Martin. So it's not sustainable. And here's Trump making this, So I think he's trying to placate the neocons, but he's really making an offer that's completely empty and meaningless.
Yeah, it's very clear. The issue on the table, you can see, especially, we'll just keep it at the air war for the moment. That with that volume that you're talking about, and from what I've seen in some Telegram channels, that's only going to increase, and apparently up to potentially 1,000 per day by the end of the year. But that's apparently they can sustain that. Is the claim. We'll see if that turns out to be. But whatever it is right now, and by the way, let me ask you, because do you actually use a Patriot air defense interceptor missile on a Shahid or a Guarantee drone? Because my understanding is that they use something else, but I don't know what else they have at scale.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else they're using. I don't know specifically what they're firing those at. All I know, though, is they're ineffective. Particularly if it's a ballistic missile, they're ineffective. And so
apparently the hypersonics, they're completely ineffective, not even a low percentage. They don't get any of them, I'm told.
And notice the cost. Each one of the PAC-3s So there are three variations, flavors of a Patriot missile: Pack 1, Pack 2, Pack 3. Most of them are now going to Pack 2 or Pack 3. Pack 2s go for about $4 million a pop. Pack 3s, $7 million a pop.
Wow. Oh,
so
really?
that means every time you fire, if you fire 2 of them, $14 million. You fire 4 of them, $28 million. To take out an inbound missile that may not even have cost half that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to see how that's going to work out over time here. I want to switch gears slightly to the consequence of some of this stuff. So if Trump has been erratic in some of the stuff he's even been claiming, that his objectives that he's even going after and what he's trying to get done here, then you have to look at the Russian side of this. How are they going to respond to this? In a video that was released this morning, I think the interview was actually done yesterday, but Sergei Lavrov was asked about the Russian reaction to this. And before he answered the direct question about the 50-day deadline, so-called, he said, look, let me just kind of lay out Russia's view on how we view this whole situation. Here's what he said.
The special military operation is aimed precisely at fundamentally eliminating the threats that the North Atlantic Alliance had been creating right on our borders. Not for a day, not for a year, but for decades. Russia had issued multiple warnings. President Putin devoted countless speeches and statements to this issue. Unfortunately, he was not heard. This only confirms what President Putin recently said in an interview with Pavel Zarubin. How his and our shared perception of relations with the West has evolved. At first, it seemed that once ideological differences were removed, everything would be fine. Then it became clear that the issue was not ideology, that the West, regardless of what ideology was practiced in the Russian Empire, in the Soviet Union, or in post-Soviet Russia, was driven by only one idea. The idea of geopolitical containment, suppression, or even direct military destruction of Russia, as has happened more than once in history.
And Russia has always been so focused on history. Remember that interview with Tucker Carlson and Putin, I think at the beginning of 23, he gave a long, hour and a half history lesson when he was talking about that. But tell our audience, is this just Russia trying to make it sound like and just creating a reason to say this is why we're opposing the West? Or is this just their impression? How do you view it?
This is your mother telling you, don't touch the hot stove. It will burn you. And if you're stupid enough not to listen to mom, you're going to get burned. That was exactly what Lavrov was saying. I don't know if you had a chance to watch Putin's interview with the interview that Pavel Zarubin did with Putin on Sunday. I posted it at Sonar 21 on Monday. But it's well worth watching. And what a contrast, first, with just how Putin speaks. He delivers coherent sentences. He's able to talk about history and historical references. But focus in on what was so critical about what Lavrov said there. He said, look, we used to think that the animus in the West was because we were communists. But that communist ideology, that's gone. We're now Russian nationalists. We're based on Christianity. He didn't say that explicitly, but that's what he meant. And he says, and instead of getting embraced by the West, because we're now nationalists, we're not embracing communism, we're promoting capitalism, and we promote Christianity, they still are building up militarily and coming after us. And he says, now we realize they want to destroy us. So Russia understands what the threat is. And that was what was so dangerous about one of the proposals that was on the table for Donald Trump, because they're talking about sending Tomahawk cruise missiles. If Trump had done that, the chances of a nuclear war would have risen dramatically, because that particular missile is capable of carrying, it is configured to carry a nuclear warhead. And Russian military planners would have assumed if that's being deployed, we've got to strike to prevent it. And At least
because correct me if I'm wrong, when the thing's flying, if you're watching radar or anything else, you have no idea what the warhead is. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. You have to assume. You can't assume that, oh, well, it's benign. And then on top of that, when you add in the comments in the last 24 hours by Lindsey Graham and by Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State and the head of the CIA, where both have basically said, in no uncertain terms, we ought to bomb, decapitate, and bomb St. Petersburg and Moscow.
I missed that part.
Well, what they said was, we need we just ask the Iranians what happened if they didn't do what we said. Well, what happened in Iran? There was decapitation and then military attack. That when those kinds of words are used, the Russians don't assume, oh, they didn't mean it. They're just joshing. You know that Lindsey Graham, he's just a character. No, they take it dead ass seriously.
Well, plus you see Lindsey Graham genuinely does have a lot of influence over Trump, as we've seen just recently. And let's get back to that 50-day issue. The second part of Lavrov's comments here were specifically about the 50-day deadline.
Therefore, as Dmitry Peskov said, we indeed want to understand what stands behind this statement. 50 days. Before, it was 24 hours. There was also 100 days. We truly want to understand what motivates the President of the United States. It is clear that he is under enormous, I would even say indecent, pressure from the European Union and the current NATO leadership, who unceremoniously support the demands of Zelensky to continue pumping his regime with modern, including offensive, weapons at the expense of increasing damage to taxpayers in Western countries. We have a saying, don't dig a pit for another. The sanctions that the European Union has now imposed, and those that are once again being prepared in Brussels, into this sanctions funnel, they are now trying to pull in the United States as well.
I want to get to the sanctions part in a second, but I want to zero in, keeping with our theme of Trump's unreliability, on something he said in the middle of that soundbite about Zelensky. When Trump had that disastrous Oval Office meeting with Zelensky at the end of February, and they got into the shouting match with the vice president and everything, I thought, okay, he's put him in his place now, and because Trump doesn't like to be upstaged, especially in his own Oval Office, so that's going to be the end of it. But then after that, Zelensky still seemed, I would say, more successful than anybody else at turning Trump back around to where he's actually doing what Zelensky wants. How do you see that dynamic?
Trump, what I'm told from people who've met with him privately, he is a different person in private than he is in this character he plays on television. And he's very insecure, and he wants to be liked. Desperate to be liked. So that could be an element of it. I wouldn't put it past Zelensky. That Zelensky was briefed up on how to butter up Donald Trump and make Donald Trump feel that he's very important. Because I think that's the one thing. Putin is polite. Putin is respectful, but Putin's not going to get down on his knees and plant his lips on Donald Trump's ample posterior.
I'm glad of that, by the way.
Yeah.
The imagery is really unpleasant.
But I think that's part of what's going on. It is, notice Donald Trump's in a position where he could have brought an end to this by doing a couple of things. One, toning down any rhetoric or criticism of Russia, or if you're making criticism of Russia, do an even-handed criticism of Ukraine. But what we've seen is there have been repeated terrorist attacks and military attacks on civilian targets in Russia. Not a word of condemnation by Donald Trump on that. On the other hand, Trump condemning attacks where Russia, accusing Russia of deliberately attacking civilians, which they are not. And that was, in fact, that was one of the things that, when your interview with Alex yesterday, he was just dead wrong. With the Russia's precise strikes with these Iskander missiles, they're deliberately avoiding civilian targets. How do I know? Because you remember early on in the war when there were, quote, civilian casualties attributed to Russia, Ukrainians brought all the press in. Here, take a picture of this body, take a picture of that body. Now, it turns out that whole thing was staged. But the point is, Ukraine, if they had really that amount of civilian casualties, they'd be bringing people in. But here's
now,
Trump.
Let me ask you a question, though, because and it's been more than a week ago now, when there was a couple of big strikes on Kiev, when they were the source of a lot of these drones, there was a lot of imagery, which we showed on this channel, that were civilian buildings that were inflamed there. Is that, how do you explain that part?
Well, what we've had in those civilian buildings are the military and NATO officers using them. I mean, Russia is not, when Russia targets, what we've seen consistently over the war, they're going after targets based on intelligence. They're not just throwing something in there saying, let's see where it hits. They've been very specific about what they're hitting. And it's just like the strike they carried out 2 days ago in that Olympics terminal port in Odessa, because that was just turned over to 2 U.S. investment firms. And Russia said, okay, here's your investment. We'll help with your remodeling. We'll do the destruction for you. But the point of all this is that Trump could have been even-handed in that. He hasn't been. Trump could have suspended and ended the weapon supply.
And what do you say to those people who say, well, how could he be even-handed? That's immoral. We're helping Ukraine. Russia was the aggressor. So how would you answer those people who say that?
Yeah, because Russia was not the aggressor. We were the aggressor. We're the ones that started this. Russia wanted to join NATO back in 2000, and we said no, refused. And that was one of the points that Putin made in his interview with Pavel Zarubin on Sunday. He said, we made repeated overtures on how we could cooperate and work together with the West on national security issues. And Putin said everyone was rebuffed. And then in response to those rebuffs, the United States and Great Britain, with the assistance of NGOs, organizations in Kiev, constructed a coup, and overthrew a democratically elected government because it didn't want to break relations with Russia.
Right.
And then passed a law to outlaw speaking of Russian in the Donbass territories, where the people have been speaking Russian from the time they were born, including Vladimir Zelensky, and then launched a military operation against them. So the Russian special forces did intervene on behalf of and with the militias, but there were a lot of members of the Ukrainian army at that time that defected to fight. Yeah. This has been provoked. This has been going on, and the President Putin gave to Biden a specific proposal on let's get these agreements in place, and one of them was to limit what missiles would be deployed in Europe. And Anthony Blinken told Lavrov in January of 2022, basically, screw you guys. We'll put whatever the hell we want in there. You don't have a say over it.
And he didn't like that? That's really strange.
Yeah. Just imagine.
We gave instructions.
Yeah.
In terms of what we've been doing in interface, I want to go to something that I had never seen publicly admitted until today. And that is, I'm going to show you Jack Keane. I know ordinarily that's just going to cause your eyes to roll, but he says something in here today that was kind of eye-opening to me. And I wonder if you'll comment on how this might have been received in Russia.
Every weapon that we have given Ukraine and every weapon that the Europeans have given them, they're all used to defend themselves against an invasion force. I mean, they have U.S. F-16 aircraft there. There's actually retired F-16 pilots flying some of those airplanes, Americans. That could obviously be considered an offensive weapon. But the reality is they're all conducting defensive operations against an invasion force. And certainly if there are bases that are are providing aircraft, and the Ukrainians can attack those bases where the airplanes are before they fly over their cities and drop the bombs, and they have to wait until they get over the cities to attack them. Which one of those is a better answer?
So right after that clip got cut off there, the anchor said, wait. You said there's American pilots in these F-16s? And so now if these American pilots are doing what he suggested and attacking targets deep inside Russia, what kind of reaction is that going to get?
Yeah, well, Russia has not reacted up to this point to clear provocations by the United States. That I always say, turn it around. If Russia was doing what we're doing to us, how would we react? Well, we'd see it as an act of war, and there'd be calls for military strikes and attacks. But I always maintain one of the reasons the Russians don't hit that button so quickly is because of the lingering memory of losing 27 million people in World War II. They understand on a human basis, a family basis, what it's like to suffer those kinds of losses. Americans, we've hardly been touched. And, not trying to offend the veterans of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, but, total KIA on that, I believe, is less than 7,000 in both wars. So come on, that was just a bad day in Stalingrad, and Vietnam, 58,000. Hey, we lose that many a year in automobile accidents, or used to, till they required seatbelts. Again, it's inconsequential. It doesn't shake the fabric of society. So, but by admitting this now, I think the Russians, I don't think they're going to go off and start bombing Washington, D.C. or attacking the continental United States. Not yet, at least. But if they follow through with long-range missiles that start striking in St. Petersburg and Moscow, which I think the Russian air defense system actually is capable of fending them off. But if anything gets through and causes significant damage, the pressure for military strike against NATO facilities in Europe is going to be off the charts in Russia.
So, and kind of to wrap up this section here, what do you think is I guess going to happen in the near term, given that they don't know who they're dealing with in Washington? Maybe it's the Trump that says, I like Putin. I know what he's going to talk about. We're going to bring this to an end. Or the one that says, no, actually, we're going to levy sanctions on you and we're going to help Ukraine. How does Russia behave from this point forward?
Russia is going to ignore Washington largely. They recognize that Trump's 50 days is a meaningless number. 100 days, because they watched him say, was it back in February? He told Hamas, it was on a Tuesday, you release those hostages or by Saturday there will be hell to pay. And Saturday came and went, and there was no hell to pay beyond the hell that they're living with. So they know that, Trump is a used car salesman. He is, he will say whatever he thinks needs to be said to try to close a deal. He'll make all sorts of promises. This is a car driven once by a little old lady, and she only got 5 miles on it. Trust me. I'm not telling you that we adjusted the odometer. So that's Donald Trump. And I think the Russians understand that. Meanwhile, the pace of their military campaign is ticking up, and it's going much quicker. Again, I disagree with Alex on the pace of it. I mean, I like some of his analysis, but as far as the taking of Pokrovsk, I think Pokrovsk will be completely surrounded and abandoned by the Ukrainians within probably 30 days because of the move.
He's actually agreeing with you on that. That's actually what he said about Pokrovsk on the show yesterday. So that's all international stuff. And I want to spend the bulk of the time that we have remaining here on a different topic here domestically, but also shows the shifting balance of Donald Trump and the reliability. What does he actually stand for? And this is having some ramifications even of his own supporters here. And that's this whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, which seems like it should have been a minor issue, but it's turned into a major issue, which he's feeding some fuel to just moments before we came on the air. First of all, about almost 3 hours ago now, Trump posted this where he first of all talks about how everything is the Democrats' fault and they did all this stuff, and you can read that if you want. Then he says these scams and hoaxes are all Democrats that are good at. It's all they have. They are no good at governing and no good at policy and no good at picking winning candidates. Unlike the Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what they will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters have bought into this BS, as he said, hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lessons and probably never will. Even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years, I have had more success than perhaps any president in our country's history. We'll have you comment on that in just a second. And these people want to talk about, with strong prodding from the fake news and the success star of Democrats, is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. He uses that term again. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking about our incredible, unprecedented successes, because I don't want their support anymore. Thank you for your support, which is a weird tag. And then just before we came on air, Trump was asked about this situation in the Oval Office.
Has your attorney general told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen?
No, it's not the attorney general. No, I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work.
Now, I'm going to ask Gary to join us here because he's got some good insights on this too, and I want him to be part of this panel that we'll have the rest of the time here. But Gary, Larry, let's start off with you. What do you think is going on here? Because Trump ran on, and all these big Republican supporters said, yes, we need to get to the Epstein list, the client list. Yeah. We need these files released. And then now all of a sudden there's a change. What do you make of it?
Well, let's give Gary some homework to do, that he has to go put together a clip of Donald Trump talking about Epstein during the campaign. But more importantly, Donald Trump Jr. made a very passionate plea with respect to it. Dan Bongino did the same, as did Kash Patel. They all talked about it as well. Alina Habiba, the attorney, talked about what was going to come out. So, you've got all of these people in the Trump campaign that were talking about it. That's number one. He calls it a hoax. Why does J.P. Morgan Chase, why did they pay a $290 million settlement to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking? And I think that was back in 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. Is J.P. Morgan Chase going to be hoaxed like that? Well, the reason they paid off the $290 million is because all of those girls who were 16, 15, 14 years of age that were sex trafficked by Jamie Dimon provided the names and identities of the men that sexually abused them. And it was considered rape because they were not of the age of consent. And the names that appear on that list are very prominent, wealthy businessmen. And the reason, a lot of people think this was done to blackmail politicians primarily, but that wasn't the case. Epstein really was targeting these very wealthy individuals because if you control them, they control the money that goes to the politicians. That's where this control comes from. So the other element here, though, is there are ample videos, photographs of Donald Trump palling around with, partying with Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, there was one at this one party, you could see him and Epstein, man, checking out the women and talking about it. So who was it that had Jeffrey Epstein arrested? Well, that was Bill Barr, and Bill Barr's father had been the headmaster at a school where he had hired, who had he hired? Oh, that was right. He'd hired Jeffrey Epstein. So there's also an Epstein connection to Bill Barr. And it was hired under Donald Trump. And then 35 days later, Epstein is dead. There are three possible things that happened. Did he commit suicide? Absolutely not. He did, because you can't break your neck by trying to fall down with a sheet tied around your neck. That was Michael Broaden, the forensic pathologist's conclusion. So either someone killed him, or there's actually an interesting photograph out there, a profile photograph, where they've got the body that was taken out of the cell on a gurney side by side with a previous profile picture of Jeffrey Epstein. The nose is different, and the ear is different. People don't maybe forget the story that Lucky Luciano staged his own death in Venice in 1970 something, and he lived another 30 years after that because he had plastic surgery, but he staged his death. So possibility it could have been a staged death. Why? Mossad getting their intelligence asset out of there. If the suicide unlikely, either a staged death or he was murdered. And he was murdered on Donald Trump's watch. That's not a hoax. That's a fact. And what Donald Trump has done now, he has damaged himself, perhaps fatally, with his base, because the people that are raising the questions about this, based in part on what was said by the Trump people during the campaign, but there is a vast body of legal evidence, court filings, and testimony out there already in the case. In fact, there's a current case underway right now involving the former attorney general of this island in the Caribbean that Jeffrey Epstein had bought off all the members in that island. And when she tried to bring charges against Jeffrey Epstein, she was fired. But now she has filed a defamation case that's still making its way through, and she's bringing in specific witnesses and allegations. So what Trump is now attacking, he's calling, he's saying it's male bovine excrement on people like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, Dave Smith. They have an enormous presence in social media. And let's add, I bet you Joe Rogan's going to be piling on now.
He has already.
Has he? Okay.
Yeah.
What does he say, Gary? Have you seen?
Oh, no, just no. This is outrageous. How does he, after all these, years, and now just in the last week, now he's calling it a hoax. He didn't call it a hoax a week ago or 3 weeks ago. Certainly didn't call it a hoax, any time in the past. But now that's what he's settling in on now, that it's a hoax.
Yeah. When Gary, let's be specific. What particular day did he start calling it a hoax? Or when did this whole thing come up that there's nothing to see there? Oh, that coincided with the arrival of Bibi Netanyahu in Washington. Yeah. Which, I think one of the issues is on this list are three former Israeli prime ministers, Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert, and I forget the other guy. That this was an Israeli intelligence operation. I believe that firmly. I think there is circumstantial evidence that certainly supports it. Tucker Carlson has said it outright that this was an Israeli intelligence operation. Yeah. And so we can't, previously I was of the mind that I didn't think that there was any incriminating evidence in there against Donald Trump. But maybe there is. Let me sketch out one possibility, because why was Jeffrey Epstein suddenly arrested in 2019? Did he happen to go to Donald Trump and make a request of his old friend, and then intimated that he had compromising material that would be released if Trump didn't agree? And then boom, he gets arrested, gets in jail, and disappears. These are that Donald Trump has now created. He set himself on fire, because the way he could have handled this was, the allegations against Jeffrey Epstein, some have been proven in court already. I take very seriously the notion of any sexual abuse of young women, and I'm going to make sure that our administration does everything, but no, there's no, that list we said was there. There's no list. Nothing to see here. He's turned into Frank Drebin, a police story. You remember the guy, Leslie Nielsen, the actor? the buildings blowing up, missiles impacting, cars exploding. He's out there. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Nothing to see here.
Gary, what did you think about the? And it's been shown a bunch on TV lately. Where I think it was as far back as February. Pam Bondi says yes. She was asked on Fox News, "Is the client list going to be released?" And she said, "It's on my desk for review." And then when she tried to backtrack that in that the meeting that she had in the not the Oval Office, in the cabinet meeting the other day, she says, "Oh, well, what I said was the file was on my desk and I hadn't reviewed it yet, but now that I have, and it turns out there's no list." What do you make of that, and what are people saying about that?
Well, it speaks for itself, right? Her trying to, to respin it as if it was the file that she was referring to, even though the question was very explicit. If anybody sees the tape, it was mentioned that he had asked about the list, and then she said it's on her desk. So, she can't back away from what she actually said there.
Yeah, and let's be clear. Epstein did not create a client list. He had a black book with names. The list we're talking about is what law enforcement should have created by conducting an investigation. So you have a witness making claims against these individuals. It doesn't mean just because a girl said she was sexually abused, you can't necessarily say, "Oh, that's true." But identify the people, and then let's go talk to those people, and then let's see if we can find corroborate. There's a way you do the investigation. That's the list that ought to be there. What have they actually investigated the people that have been named in these civil suits, and where judgments were, like I said, J.P. Morgan's paid out in one case $290 million. I think the total amount that J.P. Morgan is paid out is close to $1 billion.
Wow. So, Larry, good. I'm sorry.
No. So we're talking a significant amount of money, and that's what's so outrageous in this. They're not doing the investigation that would lead to these prominent individuals.
Larry,
go ahead.
And that's exactly what Alan Dershowitz is calling for, Larry. Exactly what you just described. And he himself was implicated for a long period of time until he actually had to go and prove himself that his the young lady that was accusing him had to actually admit that, yes, it wasn't true, that she was lying. And he won that in court. Now, Dershowitz is calling that's what, get this list out there, and that anybody that needs to prove themselves just the way he had to, Dershowitz had to prove himself innocent, that's what these others might have to do or should have to do with a proper investigation.
Have you seen the YouTube of Dershowitz talking about, well, he didn't go to the island, but he did go to Jeffrey Epstein's mansion, and he got a massage, but he kept his underwear on. I mean, I'm not making, that comes out of his mouth. Mm-hmm. And so what he's doing is what I call the lawyer trick. He's trying, because this one girl, Virginia Giuffre, misidentified him. See, I'm innocent, but I kept my underwear on. So you're getting a massage from a woman, and anyone else said, "Well, I really don't like massages." Really? Come on. I can't believe he was stupid enough to say that. Because
Gary, what do you think is the I guess the consequence, or the potential consequence among Trump's base? Larry mentioned that a second ago as a potential consequence, to be called stupid and "I don't need your support anymore," as he just did on Truth Social. What do you think that's going to have an impact?
It's funny. Everybody, I think even people that don't like Donald Trump often admit that, he can read a room pretty well. And although he might flip-flop to read a room, he can read it and in the moment, make his new assessment. And it might be totally different than what he said a minute ago. But he's good. He pays attention, and he reads people. Even people that don't like him admit to that. But I'll tell you, boy, I think he's really severely, and maybe because he has to, misreading what's going on here with what his base is saying. You heard the list that Larry just went through. I mean, prominent people that everybody, their household names: Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, go down the list, Joe Rogan. These are people that are not letting go. They're not backing down. They're not going to. So, and Trump is double, tripling down. Well, they're not letting go. In fact, I just put this up before, even Mike Johnson is calling for Pam Bondi to come clean. So he's not in good shape. He doesn't have many people on his side whereas the people that would normally, advocate for Trump are saying, buddy, you better drop this potato.
Well, and let's tie back into Russia and these other things, because 2 weeks ago they were touting, see how great the economy's doing. All those people who warned that the tariffs were going to cause inflation, they're wrong. And then the recent report we got, actually we had inflation now in June. It ticked up. And when he's talking about wanting to put more tariffs on Russia, well, the only things we really import from Russia, nitrogen for fertilizer, and uranium, processed uranium as nuclear fuel for nuclear power plants. Well, if you're going to increase the price of a power plant fuel, guess what? That means consumers are going to pay more for electricity. If you're going to increase the price that farmers have to pay for fertilizer, you're going to increase the price of food. And the full effect of these tariffs that Trump has imposed have not yet fully hit financially. I don't think we're going to start seeing the full financial impact on it until August, 1st of September. Then all of a sudden, you've got the economy's not going to be doing great. Remember, was it in February, after Trump first announced this tariff, this tough tariff program? He said specifically, these countries are lining up, quoting, to kiss my ass. Well,
I remember that.
It looks like not much ass kissing going on of late, because they're still trying to announce a major trade deal with any of these countries. So he's failed on that. His public approval rating is at the lowest point in the history of both his first term and this term now. It's fallen dramatically in the last 3 months.
Well, now what's going to happen, Larry, if we had Jennifer Kavanaugh on our show this morning from Defense Priorities, talking specifically about how the sanctions could backfire if this, at the end of this 50 days they go into. But one of the things she pointed out there, which Lindsey Graham didn't in his big full-throated support of Trump doing this on Sunday, was that if you put a 100% tariff on everybody who does oil business with Russia, you're going to be slapping that on the European Union, or at least many in European countries. What's going to happen with that? How's that going to be played?
Yeah, he's not going to do it. I mean, he says he's going to do it. He's made a lot of these threats in the past. But you see what's happening right now, particularly like with China. There's not been a lot of talk about that trade deal with China. Why? China is still withholding rare earth minerals, and the antimony and gallium in particular are the two critical rare earths essential for production in the defense industry, for both the antimony is used in the high explosives. China's cut those off. They're making sure that U.S. defense industry doesn't get it. Also, the magnets that go into it. So China's not rolling over and giving Trump what he wants. And what Trump is discovering is that we're vulnerable. Maybe Trump knew that all along, but now we've cut off our nose to spite our own face. And China is becoming more aggressive in terms of its diplomatic language in response to the U.S. insults, because they said in the interview that the foreign minister gave the other day, he said very explicitly, we cannot afford to let Russia lose in Ukraine, because if they do, we're next on the chopping block, and we understand that. Okay, and it's not like they've been building up militarily to attack us. The reason they're building up militarily is because of our actions, really over the last 30 years, of attacking other countries and making verbal threats. And now we've completely pretended that the law we passed recognizing Taiwan as a part of China is no longer law. It's no longer in play. And so the complete abandonment of trust. And then these leaders sit back and they watch this erratic behavior by Donald Trump. On the one hand, pretending that, he and Putin and he and Xi, we're the best of friends. They really like me. They didn't like Joe Biden, but they like me. This is classic narcissistic behavior, and it's getting more extreme. So,
and Gary, let me run back to you again, because that's going to lead to the potential, whether it's in September, in any number of things, if these deals don't come to pass, if we don't have all these, scores of people lining up to do this great deal and, kiss the president's ass or whatever, and the economic issues continue to compound, the prices don't come down, wages don't go up, and then now that we have this simmering Epstein issue here, and let me start first with, have you seen any reaction from any of those people you just mentioned, whether it's Tucker, Candace, or some of the others? Have they had any response to being basically called out by Trump?
Oh yeah, they have any human natural response that who is this guy? They don't even recognize the man that they voted for. So I think that's what's so prominent with everybody. It's not like there's one or two. There's a handful of people.
See, that's a big problem to me, because Trump, and it was a lot of people claimed that it was these influencers that Trump courted. He courted them more than mainstream media, and they said that was really responsible for a lot. If you lose some of those, I mean, what could happen?
Yeah.
Well, and like I said, you just showed you, even Mike Johnson. So it's not just these people that are outside his inner circle. There's people right on the inside of the circle also. So I think that's the other thing that's starting to evolve. And obviously the Democrats aren't letting go of this at all. In fact, they were even hesitant to be jumping on it. Really, they were indifferent to it. But now you'll see even more Democrats saying, "Hey, yeah, you know what? Yeah, let's get to the bottom of this Epstein files."
Now, watch what the two people I would watch in the next 24 hours, and I'm not trying to take audience away from you there, Danny, but Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens, because I anticipate that the women are going to be much more outraged by Trump's comments and his what they're going to view as a personal attack on their own integrity and their intelligence, because of what's at the heart of this sex trafficking. And of those
Great
two,
point.
Candace Owens, man, she will not back down.
She's not passive.
Nor should she.
Yeah, no. So I anticipate that she's going to light him up. And then Trump, I don't know, did you happen to see the debate between Josh Hammer and Dave Smith at the Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA convention? Now, it was on Israel, but they did get into some of the Epstein stuff, as well as did Tucker Carlson did a presentation on Epstein, or answered a significant question about him. The majority of the crowd
also did Laura Ingraham, by the way. She also said, "Yeah, let's get that stuff released," at that same conference.
Yeah, so the crowd overwhelmingly was supporting the Tucker Carlson position, the Dave Smith position, and these are hardcore Trump supporters, or were. I think you're going to see Trump. Trump has now, I think, fatally damaged himself, and even if he now comes out and tries to recover by producing a list, but he's doubled down. He's too far down now. He forgot that rule of crisis management. When you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah. How do you call it a hoax and then actually produce a list? So which is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be hard to spin too. So listen, in the last bit of time we have here, let me just kind of ask the question that probably is already starting to appear to a lot of people. If what you said, Larry, at the beginning of the show, that you think that there's something genuinely cognitively amiss about Trump, and by the way, I ascribe to that theory. I think that there is genuinely something wrong with him. I'm not just saying, oh, he's a bad president or his policies are dumb or whatever. I think there's actually something wrong. Yeah. If that's the case, and if this kind of stuff keeps going and he picks a fight with his best core supporters, people are going to start talking about 25th Amendment.
Yeah, no, exactly. I would say that the only way to save the Republicans in Congress is to have a 25th Amendment and have J.D. Vance take over, because J.D. Vance can at least speak coherently. A lot of times when you listen to Donald Trump, it's like listening to Dustin Hoffman in that movie Rain Man. Yeah. I'm going to repeat myself over. Yes, yeah, I'm going to repeat myself over again. Okay. Yeah. It's great. It's nothing bad. It's like, dude, can you talk normal? just have. I understand you can be enthusiastic, but if that doesn't happen, the Republicans get wiped out in 2026. And then, you know what? I think the Democrats, like the Republicans did with Biden, they'll keep Trump around because God help anybody that has to run saddled with Donald Trump's baggage in 2028. They're that cynical and that uncaring about the American people and this country. But again, Trump's interest, I'm convinced, is no longer in making America great. This is all about servicing Donald Trump's ego. And unfortunately, he's now attacking those who actually wanted to help him and who were, Tucker Carlson is not a bad person.
No.
Tucker is a very honorable person. And the best thing about him is he admits it when he's wrong.
And look, he brought me on his show earlier this year specifically because he thought that the position that we were holding on the Russia-Ukraine war is one that the president should adopt. Yeah. And he wanted to amplify that. He told me that before we went on the air. So I know for sure that's the case. And clearly he's been doing a lot of things to help the president, but he also has his own view of what he thinks is right. And he doesn't, dissemble from that.
Right.
Gary, if I could just, in the last few minutes.
The other thing is that MAGA is really getting fed up with what's going on in Gaza. If you look at the people who you wouldn't think would maybe, wouldn't think, but they were maybe more dismissive of it early on, but that has really come to an echelon where they can no longer, they have to admit Trump's hypocrisy, where he's talking about so much he wants to end war, but then look at this. How do you can't reconcile those two things. So these are MAGA people. You'll see it in the comments if you go through social media. That has come to such an echelon, and then obviously the whole what's a hoax? I'll end the war in Ukraine really soon. That's the hoax.
Yikes! And that's actually kind of what I was going to ask you, Gary. Because there's so many people who've just been absolutely blindly behind anything Trump said. And they've ignored so many inconsistencies and contradictions because they just love the man. But now then there's a bunch of stuff coming up. So my question to you is, how much more will they be able to stomach before they start actually turning against him? Because, man, if you lose that, it could turn into an avalanche.
Yeah, it's happening, Danny, already. Like with the people that we've been mentioning already, their enthusiasm for him is lost. There's no more enthusiasm for him. Now it's getting to the level of, can we tolerate him any longer? Yikes. And that's what's starting to crumble.
Yeah. The people they're satisfied. The main issue he ran on and got his support from was stopping the influx of illegal migrants at the border, and that's happened. And people are very happy with that.
Yes.
They're happy that so far inflation has fallen, or was falling until this last report. The price of gasoline had dropped, so you could get eggs again at the store. So they're happy with those things.
Right.
But what Trump's policies are doing now, particularly with respect to tariffs and the politicization of the tariffs. And what I mean by the politicization is when he imposed 50% tariffs on Brazil, because he didn't like Brazil's policies towards Bolsonaro, the former president who's facing prosecution in Brazil. Here's Brazil, who runs a trade surplus with us. That means that they're buying more of our stuff than we're buying of theirs, which is good for us. And now all of a sudden we're imposing tariffs, and Lula reacted immediately. Okay, all that U.S. goods, those are going to be tariffed at 50%. Well, all of a sudden, these U.S. producers that were selling things to Brazil, they're going to be forced to cut back. They're not going to be able to sell it anymore. One of the major exports from Brazil was orange juice. Well, now orange juice prices are going to go up within the next month in light of those tariffs. So Trump is actually starting to affect the economic base of his supporters. And again, we haven't seen the full impact of that, but I think once it hits probably around September, then the panic, then the Republicans and people like Mike Johnson and others, they're going to start hitting the panic button, because they'll recognize that Trump in his erratic behavior is really jeopardizing their hold on power. He likes being in that office just like Nancy Pelosi did.
Right. Yeah, and with the midterms coming up, as you said, they're not going to want to be having any anchors on them. Well, listen, we'll leave it there for the time being, but this is definitely not going anywhere. We're going to keep a close eye on this and look forward to having you back on again real soon, maybe even talk about that Syria thing. But this has the potential, and actually, let me give you the last word. What potential does this, how are both our adversaries and our allies going to be viewing if we have this kind of turmoil inside the Trump world?
They're going to take measures like Iran is right now to build itself up militarily for the next round. They fully anticipate and expect they're going to be attacked again. And this time they're going to be ready. The last attack that took place, and this would get us off on a whole nother issue with respect to Azerbaijan, but Azerbaijan has been a very bad actor in this, but Azerbaijan is in a very, very, very weak and vulnerable position. There are only 10 million people in Azerbaijan. They're entirely dependent on their oil industry. Iran can knock out their oil industry in one fell swoop. And notice that 2 weeks ago, Russia took out 2 oil refineries in Ukraine that were owned by one Mr. President Aliyev of Azerbaijan. They were his personal refineries, and a lot of that oil was flowing to Israel. Russia blew them up. They had left them alone for the last 3 years. They had not touched him as a favor to Aliyev. Now that Aliyev started meddling and doing what he's done and cooperating. So it's just, Russia doesn't make a big, when it delivers payback, it doesn't send out a press release and have an elephant parade and a marching band. They do it quietly. But
revenge served cold.
Yeah, it's like the horse head in the bed. You wake up and go, oh my God.
Yeah, but that message was received. I promise you that. But
there's Mr. Ed.
All right. Well, listen, we appreciate you coming on today and covering this huge gamut of stuff that we talked about. Really appreciate it. One of the reasons we are our go-to guest, because you seem to have a good answer on all this stuff. I guess it's part of your CIA training or something. But
that got me in trouble in elementary school.
I have no doubts about that. We'd love to hear that on that. But we thank you guys too. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done it yet, so we can keep on giving you great stuff, because we will remain unintimidated and uncompromised to give you the truth you need. Also, don't forget, actually, about 50 minutes from now, we're going to have another great one with Ted Postal, because Iran's nuke program is intact, and he's got some very interesting, you have seen nowhere else, and you're not going to see it anywhere else except for right here on Daniel Davis Deep Dive, that Professor Ted Postal is going to show you some very interesting information that you're going to find very useful to have. Thank you very much, and we will see you then to 3 o'clock today, Ted Postal on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.